The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
The following program is closed captioned for the thinking impaired.
By tomorrow, I will rule the world!
You think he's gone? He's not gone. That's the whole point. He's never gone.
Is this some radical new therapy?
You see?
Well, I must have not been paying attention when you were just talking.
We'll give it a shot.
Do you think that you could repeat the question?
Heard any good rumors lately?
Listen more attentively.
I've heard a lot of things lately.
Yeah, me too. None of them true, but I've heard them.
I am. I'm not even sure I'm allowed to talk about it.
Well, if I'm not allowed to talk about it, you're certainly not allowed to talk about it.
Are we allowed to say that we're not allowed to talk about it?
I don't know.
Did I just get us into trouble?
We could. I don't know that we're allowed to say that we're not allowed to talk about it.
Uh-oh.
All I can say is tomorrow always comes.
Sorry, I nearly just started nervous laughing on there, thinking that I just got you into trouble by being facetious.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Like, I don't want what we're not allowed to talk about to happen again because we didn't talk about it.
Right.
But we said that we're not allowed to talk about
We're not allowed to talk about it. I'm not even sure we're allowed to say we're not allowed to talk about what we're not allowed to talk about.
Yep, could have just got into trouble again. All right, well, I'm going to stop doing that.
Not a laughing matter, though.
Not at all.
The lifetime movie of the week starring you and I.
Didn't think I was going to get that in. Did not think I was going to get that.
You're a champion.
All right, should we get this show on the road?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Start popping. Hi, how you guys doing? My name's Tom Duggan here with the Paying Attention Podcast. Hi, the top two guys smoke shop at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. Now, sometimes I come in and I say we've got a really good show for you, and I really don't mean it. I'm really just kind of hoping it's going to be a good show, but I'm not really sure if it's going to be a good show. And maybe I'm going to raise the expectations a little too high today, but I think today's going to be a good show because I decided when I was thinking about what to do for today that, you know, some of our best shows are educational shows. Shows when I kind of, like when we did the whole thing on voter fraud, how does voter fraud work? How do people steal votes in an election? And it was a 40-minute, basically a how-to for those people who go, oh, come on, it's impossible to steal an election. And we actually physically showed you how it works. And we showed you videos. And I pulled up numbers, and I showed you, like, the whole thing. So it was kind of an instructive thing on kind of like, you know, voter fraud 101. And those tend to be my best shows. If we go back and we look at the ratings for the different shows that we've had, most of the shows at the top ratings are the ones where it was kind of instructional, where it was kind of like it educated the public as to how things work. And so I was thinking about today's show, well, first let me thank my sponsors. But I think we're going to have a good show today. Let's do the sponsors. So we definitely want to thank Century 21, McLennan Real Estate, Century 21, Zanny Pesci Law Office. So usually it's the Pesci that I couldn't get today. I couldn't get office out. And that's just,
that's
you know,
new.
You know what? It's a remnant of the coma. And believe it or not, it's 7 months later, but I'm still finding myself getting words wrong. And it's happening less and less. Like I can feel myself getting better with it, but it does happen. Marseille and Son Construction, EIS Investigation and Gun Training, Borelli's Deli and Par 28, and Time Out Sports Bar. Now, they're not an official sponsor at the moment, but I love those guys so much that I just love promoting them. So we just want to thank them for all the stuff they're doing in the community. And by the way, they do volunteer. They donate food for the homeless for TMF on Wednesday nights. Like once a month, they show up with like a huge tray of food, a bunch of trays of food. So thank you to the Tamacchio family for that. Tomo and Shaken Seafood, Clear Path for Veterans New England, AFC Urgent Care. Had lunch with Zaka this week from AFC Urgent Care, and we had a very long conversation about a whole bunch of stuff. And I think for the June edition, we're going to be doing a highlight of all the different doctors and some of the services at AFC Urgent Care. Because it's one thing to buy an ad, but a lot of times when people flip through newspapers, they don't look at the ads.
True.
But if you write a story about the business it's advertising, people will read that. So we want to do that for AFC. In fact, we're going to do that for some of our other long-term advertisers, too, to kind of thank them on this, our 20th anniversary of the Valley Patriot. Who else do we leave? Our Pleasant Valley Landscaping Contractors. I understand that Dave Consoli is looking for workers. I think everybody at this point is looking for workers. Just about everybody that I know is looking for workers because everybody wants a job, but nobody wants to frickin' work.
This is what I'm seeing and hearing.
Yeah, so I have at least twice a week, people will call or come to my office and ask me if I have any job openings. And so I ask them, like, what are you looking for? Like, are you a writer? Do you want to deliver newspapers? Like, what is it that you're looking for? And they're like, they don't care. So they want a job, but they don't want to work. Like, they don't have a specific thing in mind. So I'll say, well, do you have any questions about, like, working for us? To kind of see what they're looking for. And they always ask questions about what their benefits are. And, you know, do they get health care? And do they get time off? Do they get paid by the hour? But they never ask, like, well, what's the job? Like, what would I be doing? If you hired me tomorrow, what would I do? Right? So they're not looking to actually work. They're just interested in having a job. And then what I find out later on is most of them, especially when I agree to hire somebody, which is very rare because I very rarely have openings, but when I actually agree to hire somebody, they never show up for work. They just needed to show unemployment that they were looking for work. So they came looking for work, but didn't actually want to freaking work. So when a guy like David Consoli, who does, you know, he does landscaping, that's physical work. You need people to show up.
Oh, yeah.
And he's always telling me that people just don't show up. He hires people and they just never show up. So he's looking for work. So if you're somebody out there, if you're motivated, if you don't mind doing work, if you want to actually make some decent money and have a decent job working for a decent guy who gives tremendous benefits, David Consoli, Pleasant Valley Landscaping Contractors is the place to go. Because if you show up, you will always have work. Like, he's not the kind of guy that's going to, like, you know, hire you for a little while, then when someone better comes along, push you aside. Because he's of that generation like I am that understands the value of work, that understands the value of having a job. So if you're looking for work, that's where you should go. Pleasant Valley Landscaping Contractors. Also, a free shout out to... who was it? JG's Ice Cream. We love JG's Ice Cream. It's starting to get warmer again, so with the JG's Ice Cream. So, a couple of things to get to real quick. The wake and funeral procession for Billerica police officer Ian Taylor is today and tomorrow. Ian is a second cousin of mine. I didn't know him well. I did know him. I've met him a few times, but I didn't know him well. But I do know and love to death his parents, Wayne and Lisa Taylor, whom I've known forever. Wayne Taylor, by the way, is a Lawrence police officer. And Lisa is actually I'm related to Lisa. I'm not related to Wayne. I'm related to Lisa. Lisa married Wayne. Lisa's an incorpora. And so our condolences to the Taylor family. And we just posted some photos about 5 seconds ago on my Facebook page of some of the police officers lining up that I drove by on my way here to the podcast studio. So our condolences to them, and maybe at a future date we'll have Lisa and Wayne come on and talk about some of the things they're going to do to honor the memory of their son that passed away as a Billerica police officer. Wow, what a way to kill a show, huh? Like, how do you recover from that?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things I want to talk about today, and it all kind of goes together. It's going to be kind of an instructional show. Because something happened last week, and I made some phone calls after it happened, and the answers that I got kind of went along with something that I mentioned on a couple of shows in passing, and I thought, this is something my audience, especially my faithful audience, the people who tune in all the time, are going to love this. So what happened? Amendment 698 in the Massachusetts State Legislature came up last week, and it was an amendment that would give preference to homeless veterans to get benefits in public housing over illegal aliens. So right now, the Democrat Party that controls Massachusetts has given preference to illegal aliens to get public housing over homeless veterans. Get it? We're all on the same page, right? So an amendment came up. It was introduced, I believe, by a Republican, because a Democrat would never do this. And we're going to explain why that is in a few minutes. To have an amendment, I think it was to the state budget, to say, well, let's give homeless veterans. There's not a lot of homeless veterans out there. I mean, the number compared to how many millions of illegal aliens are streaming into the country right now, comparatively speaking, is very low. So it's not like it would stretch the budget to give preference to a homeless freaking veteran who served his country and now has no place to live. And yet almost every single friggin' Democrat, including my friends, including Estella Reyes, including Frank Moran, including Rodney Elliott, including Francisco Polino, including Adrian Ramos, they all voted no. They all voted no, and I could not believe it. I'm looking at the list of who voted no on giving preferences to veterans for public housing over illegal aliens. That means if there's a guy from Vietnam sleeping on the street who served his country in Vietnam, maybe he's missing a leg, and he's got no place to live. But some guy from Bosnia came across the border 3 days ago, that we're going to at least take care of the guy that served in Vietnam first before the guy from Bosnia that came across the Mexican border. I don't know anybody who privately would tell you that that's a bad idea, including the reps that I spoke to. So when I learned of this, by the way, the vote was 129 no. 129 state reps in Massachusetts voted no on giving homeless veterans preference in public housing over illegal aliens. And 27 voted yes, almost all of them Republican, with the one exception that I could find, Colleen Gary, who's a Democrat from Drake. So I'm looking at these numbers and I'm thinking, I know a lot of state reps. A lot of these people are my friends. I campaign for them at election time. How the hell do I go out and hold a sign for these people knowing they voted like this? So I called a couple of them up, and I'm not going to mention names because it's not about shaming any individual. Today it's going to be an instructional show to show you how bad things happen in your legislature. Like, how does this happen? How do you get a bunch of reasonably intelligent people with college degrees who campaign, who knock on doors, who promise to take care of the poor and the downtrodden, who promise to take care of the veterans, then get together all in one room and say, no, we don't want to give preference to homeless veterans over illegal aliens? How does that happen? I'm more interested in the mechanics of how that comes to be. So I called a couple of state reps, and again, I'm not going to give you their names because it's not important. And I said to each of them, in a different way each time, because it's different people you're talking to, how the hell do you justify this come re-election time? When a guy like me gets you on my show and I ask you, how do you justify this? And the answer that I got from every one of them was almost exactly the same. We just change the subject and we move on. And I said, okay, well, let me ask you, how do you justify it to me alone on the phone right here with no microphone? And that's why I'm not giving you any names, because when I give my word that a conversation is going to stay off the record, it stays off the record. But I want you to understand what occurred. And that's why, so I'm not going to give you the names, but I spoke to 3 different reps who said to me, Tom, if I vote no on this, I don't get any committee assignments, which means I don't make more money, which means I can't pay my mortgage. And I was like, wow. So when the first guy said this to me, I said, what a selfish bastard. And then I called another rep, and I got the same answer. And then I called a third rep, and I got the same answer. They worded it differently. They couched it differently. They made it try to seem better than what it was. But at the end of the day, if we don't do what leadership tells us to do, we don't get committee assignments. Why is that important? Here's why that's important. Some of these numbers are going to be off because they're a year old. So I'm lowballing these numbers. So just so that you know, these are the low numbers. I'm not exaggerating up. I'm exaggerating down because these are last year's numbers. Speaker of the House in Massachusetts makes $200,000 a year. His base pay is $73,654. But he's making over $200,000 a year because he chairs committees. In the legislature, if you run for state rep and you become the state representative for the city of Lawrence, let's use another community. Let's use Andover. You're the state rep for the town of Andover. And you win and you're a Democrat. Because, by the way, you can't win if you're a Republican in Andover. That's been proven. Jim Lyons will be the last of the Mohicans on that one. So you become the state representative. Your base pay is about $76,000. But, and Diana DiZoglio spoke about this extensively when she was here. But if you do what the speaker tells you to do, if you vote the way the head of the Democrat Party who runs the legislature tells you to vote, then they will give you a committee assignment. And for each committee that they put you on, you get a bump in pay. So to just be a state rep and just go and vote on all the things that come up on the floor, like the budgets and the amendments, you get $76,000. That's your base pay. But then if they put you on, let's say, 5 committees, well, you can get upwards of $20,000 to $60,000 for each additional committee that you sit on. And more if you're the chairman of that committee or the vice chairman of that committee. Well, that bumps a $76,000 pay up by 300% if you kiss ass to the speaker. But what does it also do if you don't kiss ass to the speaker? If you don't vote to give benefits to illegal aliens over homeless veterans, well, then you don't get those committee assignments. And instead of bringing home $250,000 next year, you're taking home 70 or 76. And this is how the Massachusetts Legislature works. And I actually have some numbers that I pulled off of Channel 7 did a story on this that went back to February of 2023. So the House Speaker and the Senate President get an additional, and by the way, that's not including your stipend. So state reps also get a stipend. So they get their base pay, plus they get additional pay for each committee that they're on, and additional pay for each time that they're on a committee that they're the chair or the vice chair of that committee. And then they get an expense stipend, which used to be calculated by how far away from the State House you had to travel. So in other words, if you're a Boston state rep and you live next door to the State House, probably don't have any expenses, right? You're not traveling from Berkshire, which is a 2-hour drive, right? You have to drive, you have to pay for gas, wear and tear on your car. You have to pay for parking once you get there. Parking in Boston is outrageous, $100 a day, $200 a day, whatever it is, right? So that's how they used to calculate the stipends. They don't calculate it that way anymore. Now it's pretty much what the speaker wants to give you, which means they're buying votes. This is what's going on in the legislature. And by the way, I understand Congress works almost exactly the same way, which is why the party that has the majority fights so hard to get the majority, because that's where the money is. See, none of this is about homeless veterans. None of this is about illegal aliens. None of this is about abortion or death penalty or any of the issues they tell you it's about. Somebody submits a bill. I remember there was a bill, State Senator Pangitakis from Lowell, and I went round after round after round on my Lowell show when I was on WCAP in Lowell. Week after week, we went around. They submitted a bill that made it mandatory that if you go sledding in Massachusetts, you have to wear a helmet because some girl hit a rock and when she fell off a sled, when she was sledding in the wintertime, hit her head and had brain damage. And the parents came, told this heart-wrenching story, and they testified before 6 different committees. And all of those people on all of those committees got extra money to be on all of those committees. So they all pushed it forward to another committee. So first it goes to like the sledding committee, and then it goes to the public safety committee. And then from there it goes to the Ways and Means committee because they have to somehow find a way to make this a money thing. That if they're going to mandate that people wear helmets, then maybe they should provide helmets for people. And then it goes from there, and then they have to send it to a study committee to study it to see if it's going to make any effect. And by the time all of this is done, these state reps are making hundreds of thousands of frickin' dollars. But what gets accomplished? Nothing. In fact, what usually gets accomplished is bad things. Because more money comes in from the federal government for illegal aliens than comes into the state for homeless veterans. And when you realize that all of this is just a big money grift, when you start looking at how state reps and state senators get paid, it really informs you as to how they behave and why they behave the way that they behave. So I pulled some numbers here from Channel 7. This was a report they did in February of last year. The Senate majority leaders and the minority leaders make $81,000 additional dollars every year for being the minority leader. That means if you're a Republican, you're in the minority in Massachusetts because the Democrats control everything. So Bruce Tarr, I believe, is the minority leader in the House. In the Senate. He is a senator from the Gloucester area, Manchester by the Sea. He's up there in that area. He not only gets his $76,000 salary, he gets an additional $81,000. And again, remember, I'm lowballing these numbers because they're last year's numbers. These have gone up. And by the way, they also wrote into, when Charlie Baker was governor, they wrote into their own pay that it automatically goes up every 2 years. Do you know anybody that gets an automatic pay raise every 2 years, other than public employees and politicians? I don't. So the majority and the minority leaders get an additional $81,000. That's more than their base pay. They double their base pay by being a majority minority leader. If you're an assistant, second assistant, or third assistant leader in the House, for the Democrat or the Republican caucuses, you get an additional $40,000 on top of that. So $76,000 plus $81,000 plus $68,000. I'm sorry, $47,000. And the 4 House division chairs of the committees on rules, bonding, post-audit, third reading, steering committee, state administration committee, health and finance committee, finance services committee, revenue economic development committee, judiciary committee, education committee, telecommunications committee, and transportation committees, chairs and vice chairs get an additional $40,000. Do you understand where I'm going with all this? When you sit back and you ask yourself, how is it possible that reasonably caring and reasonably intelligent people who run for state rep and knock on my door every year and say they care about the poor, they care about the downtrodden, they care about homeless veterans, how is it that these people can all get into a room and suddenly all agree to screw homeless veterans? How does that happen? That's how it happens. That's how it happens. I had a state rep say to me, I'm a first-term state rep. I don't want to out anybody. This person said, I'm a first-term state rep. If I want a second term, I've got to vote for everything leadership wants me to do. Because if I don't, they're going to put up somebody who's more liberal to run against me in a primary. And then they're going to finance that person's campaign. And I can't raise the kind of money that these guys in Boston can raise. So now I'm not a state rep anymore. Somebody more liberal than me gets in and is doing even more crazy liberal shit. So how does that help anybody, Tom? Tom, I got to go along. I got to go along and get a little bit seniority. I got to get on a bunch of committees. I got to go along and get along. And then maybe, once I've climbed the ladder a little bit, then maybe I can make a difference. And to that person, I said, why don't you call Colleen Gary, the state representative from Drake-it? Because that's what she tried to do. And ask her how that worked out for her. Because she's got an office in the basement. She's not on any committees. I think they maybe put her on one committee. Maybe one committee. She's not the chair of any committee. She's not the vice chair of any committees. There's 37 million committees. Every day they make up a new committee so that they can pay people more of your tax money. And that's not what we send state representatives and state senators to Beacon Hill to do. We send them there to create laws that will protect us. We send them there to manage the state budget so that your state police and your transportation department and all the things that the state is in charge of, welfare and the Division of Children's Services, will service people in a way that's effective and efficient. Not to make more money screwing homeless veterans, but they're screwing homeless veterans because it's profitable to screw homeless veterans. They're screwing homeless veterans, and they're giving illegal aliens preference in public housing over homeless veterans. Because if they don't go along and get along and make more money in the process, they end up like Colleen Gary. They're making their base $76,000 a year, and they've got to get 2 jobs just to make up the difference. Just imagine you get a job, and they tell you your job is going to pay you $75,000 a year. But we're going to double and triple that if you do a whole bunch of stuff that you don't really want to do. We're going to put you on a couple of committees and we're going to triple your salary. And by the way, there's no attendance record in the legislature. So these people who are on committees don't even have to show up at the committee meetings. When I testified, when I wrote the state's public records law, Mass General Law, Chapter 66, and I submitted my revisions to the law, I had to testify before 5 different committees. Now, I didn't know all of this stuff back then, but I was very good friends with Linda Campbell, who was the state representative in Methuen. She was actually chair of 2 of the committees that I testified before. And on one of those committee hearings, I showed up, and there were supposed to be like 7 committee members at the table. There were 3. There were 3 that showed up. 3. That means the other 4 people who were supposed to be at that committee hearing to hear our testimony about something really important like public records laws and what's considered a public record and what should the public have access to. They were getting paid almost double their salary to be on that committee, to hear my testimony, to consider how to vote on a public records law, and never even bothered to show up. And you've got guys, and again, this is not to shame people by name, but you've got a state senator in Andover who's got like a 10% attendance record. Maybe it's like 12%. I forget what the actual number is, but it's really low. And he still gets paid. He still gets paid to be on the Ways and Means Committee and the Snowball Committee and the Traffic Committee and whatever committee that they can, by the way, they can make up as many committees as they want and spend as much of your money paying off state reps and state senators to do what they want to do. And all of it comes down to how much more money we're going to get from the federal government to do what we want to do. And it's very clear that the Democrat Party is all in with illegal aliens. You know, they have this thing called the Great Replacement Theory. This is where I'm going to lose most people because I'm going to get a little bit political, but it's got to be said. For the last 10 years, Democrats have said on CNN and MSNBC and all over the news, even on C-SPAN, that what we have to do to turn Texas from a Republican state to a Democrat state is import more people because the people who are already there, they're middle-class white voters, they're not voting for us, they're voting Republican. So they open the borders so more Latinos will come in, hoping that those Latinos are going to vote Democrat. By the way, it's not going to work out the way they think it is. It might in the short term, but what you're starting to see in America now is Latinos are now starting to vote in much larger numbers for Republicans. You watch how quickly the Democrats are out there. Elizabeth Warren will be out there putting the bricks in the wall herself, building a wall on the southern border when those numbers become bigger. But why do I bring all that up? Because we're importing all of these illegal aliens into Massachusetts. They come over the Mexican border. The federal government's flying them to Massachusetts. They took over the Roxbury Activity Center. Whatever they call it, Senior Center, Activity Center. And now the black people in Roxbury is predominantly black. The black people in Roxbury don't have an activity center because it's now being overrun by illegal aliens who came here from another country illegally. They're not supposed to be here. We have laws that govern how people can come into this country legally in accordance with our laws. And these people did not come here that way, but they're being aided by the federal government. And for every illegal alien they send to Massachusetts, they're sending a check. They're not sending a check directly to the illegal alien. This is how the grift works. The check from the federal government goes to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And all the politicians take their cut off the top by discussing it in committees, right? Every single Democrat who voted to give preference to illegal aliens over Democrats, over homeless veterans, I mean. Every single one who voted, that amendment, what was the amendment number? Let me pull it up again. So you guys, because people actually fact check me in real time sometimes with the show, and it's kind of fun. Amendment 698. You know how Amendment 698 even came to the floor for a vote? It went through a bunch of committees. And all these state reps made a shit ton of money sitting on those committees and hearing, oh, no, we should let the illegal aliens have preference over veterans. Oh, that sounds good to me. How much more money can you give me? And that's how it happens. So they're putting money in their pocket by being on the committee and going along to getting along. But the Commonwealth itself is getting more money from the federal government, who's not giving a check to the illegal alien. They're not giving a check to the guy from Bosnia that just got here. It goes to the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth takes a percentage for administrative costs. And it goes to a state agency who takes a cut, who hires more people to administer the money. And then a portion of it gets to the illegal aliens. And still a pox on their house because that money should be going to fucking homeless veterans. If anyone deserves free everything in this society, it's not snobby college kids. It's not illegal aliens. It's not even legal aliens. It's not even guys like me. It's mentally retarded adults. It's homeless veterans. It's children who have been abused. It's people who can't take care of themselves. And our government cannot pay the freight to service people who are American citizens who cannot take care of themselves. And while we are neglecting those people, we're spending billions and billions of dollars on citizens of other countries who are citizens of other governments that other governments are responsible for taking care of. I'll tell you, when I interviewed, it was one of the most enlightening interviews I ever did. I interviewed Newt Gingrich when he was running for president about 8 years ago. And I stole an idea from a guy named Sam Meese. Sam Meese is a guy who ran for Congress probably about 15 years ago in Haverhill. He never had a shot. He was running as a Republican, but he had the greatest idea in the world. Sam Meese was in the killing fields in Cambodia as a child. And he made it to this country. Both his parents were murdered in the killing fields. And he came to this country as a legal immigrant. And he came here as a child. And he had a family here that sponsored him. And then he ran for Congress about 15 years ago. And I threw this at Newt Gingrich when I interviewed him. I said, Newt, I got a friend, Sam Meese. He ran for Congress. He came up with this great idea. Because I don't want to steal anybody's idea. I want to give everybody credit, right? He said, if you're here from another country illegally and you break your arm and you go to the hospital, I'm okay with paying for that up front. Because you have a broken arm and we should take care of your broken arm. We're a compassionate country. But we should take the amount of money that we spent paying that hospital for your broken arm and charge it to your home country that's supposed to be responsible for taking care of them. In other words, if you came here from El Salvador and we're educating you in our public education system, that's an expense at the American taxpayers. We should calculate how much that is and we should bill their home country. And I guarantee you, if we started doing that, those countries would take it in their own interest to not send more people here illegally. You want to come here legally, you want to become an American citizen, come in through a port of entry, apply, do the health screening that you're supposed to do, pay the fine that you're supposed to pay, go through the criminal background screening you're supposed to do. I'm all for making it easier for people who want to come here legally. But those who are coming here illegally are a burden upon the American taxpayer. And if we're going to allow this, which obviously we are, we shouldn't be, but we are, we ought to at least be able to say that the money that we're spending on these illegal aliens, we're going to charge back to their home country. You would think American politicians would like that, but they don't. Even Newt Gingrich, a conservative Republican running for president at the time that I interviewed him up in Manchester, New Hampshire, said, Tom, terrible idea. Terrible idea. Because we give grants to all of those countries. We give foreign aid to all of those countries. We can't be sending them a bill. We need to send them money to make their country better so that no one will come here. And I just said, well, how's that working out? Like, I'm not as smart as you are. The guy's brilliant, way smarter than I'll ever be. But I just asked him, how's that working out? Do we have fewer illegal aliens coming here because we're sending billions of dollars to other countries to make it better there? No. We all know what's going on. We send billions of dollars there, but first it has to be administered here, which means more politicians make money off that money. And then we send it to a country like, let's just say, El Salvador, and it's a corrupt country, so all of their leaders are taking money off the top and buying yachts with it and buying mansions with it and going to Sweden with it and buying property in other countries. And very little of it is trickling down to the people at the bottom to make their country better so that those people won't come here. It's all a fucking grift, all of it. And once you realize that the entire American political system is a money grift, it all starts to make sense. Instead of scratching our head saying, why would these people in the Mass Legislature want to give better benefits to illegal aliens than homeless veterans? That makes no sense. Once you realize how the money works, it makes perfect sense. These people have sold us out. And they kind of have no choice. Because if you're a good person and you run for state senate, you run for state rep, and you're a one-term rep, as the one-term rep that I spoke to said to me, If I don't go along and I don't get along, you get somebody worse in the next election because they're never going to let me get through a primary. Because in order to get elected, I've got to run as a Democrat in a Democrat primary, and they can run somebody to the left of me, someone who's more woke, someone who's more pro-illegal alien, someone who hates veterans, who hates the police, that wants to defund the police. How does that help anybody? And they're right. They're right. So how do we fix it? I don't know. I don't have the answers. But now that I know how it works, I think it's important for you guys to know how it works. So come election time, maybe, just maybe, we can talk to the people who are running for office about standing up against leadership and saying, you know what, I don't care. It's tough, right? I don't care that you're not going to triple my pay. I'm not voting for that. And maybe, just maybe, those people will become the new leaders of tomorrow. Maybe, just maybe, Estella Reyes and Francisco Polino and Frank Moran and Rodney Elliott will become the next speaker and put a stop to this foolishness. But unfortunately, there's so many millions and millions of dollars to be made by doing it this way that it's never going to change. It's only going to get worse. And now you know what? That, by the way, that's why you really need to have a two-party system. That's why New Hampshire does so much better than Massachusetts. Because in New Hampshire, it's a two-party system. You get Democrats and Republicans, and they're pretty even. They're pretty equal. Right? We went from a Governor Gene Shaheen who was a Democrat to Governor Sununu who was a Republican. And a real Republican, not like a Charlie Baker. Charlie Baker, there's nothing Republican about Charlie Baker. Their legislature is predominantly Republican. Sometimes their Senate flips to Democrat, but usually not. So there's a give and take, so you can put a stop to the nonsense. But when you have a one-party state, well, that's what communism is. Communism is a one-party state. So when I come into the show and I say, well, Massachusetts is a one-party state, it's a communist state, people laugh and think I'm exaggerating. Think about everything I told you today. There's no exaggeration to any of that. In fact, the numbers that I gave you, the hard numbers I gave you, are actually low numbers because they're last year's numbers. Those numbers went up this year. I don't know what this year's numbers are. All right. Thank you to Chrissy for producing the show today. Let me pull up my sponsors. Roll up Mel on the sponsors. I want to thank Century 21, McLennan Real Estate. A free shout out to JG's Ice Cream. Pleasant Valley Landscaping Contractors. If you're looking for a job, give Dave Inconsoli a call. AFC Urgent Care. We're going to get Zaka in here in the next couple of weeks. Clear Path for Veterans New England. Tomo and Shaken Seafood. If you go to Tomo, you want to get the kamikaze. Trust me. And if you're going to go to Tomo and you're going to sit at the grill when they do the thing with the egg in the pocket and all that, you want to get the Emperor's Delight. It's a little expensive. Trust me, it's worth it.
Totally worth it.
Totally worth it.
Can confirm. Totally worth it. The scallops and the
the scallops are amazing. And it's not like Joe Fish. You're not getting baby scallops pretending to be.
I've not been, so I couldn't say, but yeah.
It's great. Borelli's Deli and Time Out Sports Bar in Haverhill. EIS Investigation and Gun Training, Marsan and Son Construction. The Zany Pesharu Law Office. Zany Pesci Law Office. And Century 21 McLennan Real Estate. Sounds like Melvin Taylor says you got to go home. So go home already.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.